Welcome back to the next installment of the Intusoft Web Studio video training series for version 7.1. This is the Active Objects number 3 training video. In this video, we're going to cover the active objects called ListBox, the Smart Message, which is actually comprised of 3 different types: the Message Display, MultiState Indicator, MultiState PushButton, and a new object called the TextBox. So let's flip on over into that. So when last we left the training videos, we had created a navigation menu and kind of a foundation level screen. We expect you to have done that before you get to this video. When last we left off in the Active Objects number 2 video, we had created an Active Objects number 2 screen, and we're going to continue to use that because we've got some extra space. So what we're going to do here is, this will show you kind of a technique. I want to move this stuff that we did out of the way in the second video. I want to window around this. I'm holding my mouse button down. I want to completely encompass all the objects on the screen. And then I can grab any one of them. Actually, I need to grab on an object, and then I can maneuver them out of the way. So I'm going to put these over to the edge, and I'm going to use this space just to make it a little bit more convenient. So the first object that we're going to do in today's video is the ListBox. Now the ListBox has a way to display multiple lines of messages and highlight an individual line. Let's take a look at the help system related to this object. So I'm going to bring up the properties. And if you remember from previous videos, I can click on this context-sensitive help icon, click on the background or anywhere here on this, and it came up off screen, but I will bring this into view here. Now the ListBox object basically creates a way to see a list of messages. And there's really a couple of different things that you have to look at. The read search tag and the write tag. We'll come back and take a look at these user and control enable in just a minute. But the read tag, if I scroll down here, is an integer or a Boolean tag that selects the message using the value field in the message configuration dialog. And the write tag, which is optional, will receive the message value of that selected line. So let's go take a look at this. Let's close the help system here. And essentially these fields are named from the perspective of the object itself. It's going to read in the value and search to that line. And optionally, we can write out to this tag name here. So let's just create a couple of new tags called ListRead. And we're going to make that an integer. And then we're going to create a new tag called ListWrite. And from the help system, this needs to be a string. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is kind of put over here ListRead text, so the tag, so I can write into this object. And then on this side, I'm going to put the write tag so I can show that that's writing out of it. So let's go grab a piece of text here, and I'm going to put over here. This was ListRead, and I'll put # in here because I'm only going to configure this with just a single digit number of lines, maybe 1 through 3 or 4. And then I'm going to apply a text animation to this, or a text data link animation to this, and we will tie it to the ListRead tag. I'm going to copy this over. I'm going to hold down the control key and copy this over to this side. The placing is irrelevant. I'm just doing it because it's kind of a left to right operation. If you think if you're in North America or any place that uses kind of left to right, you'll kind of think logically that this writes into that and this ends up over here. So we'll think that way. Here I'm going to change this text to the ListWrite tag. I'm going to go back and change the caption to correspond to that. Okay, so now what we have is an object that has multiple lines. I can configure this to write to tell it which line to go to, and then this object will receive the line number that it's on. Well, how do I configure those messages? First of all, here we have a value type, and we can configure this to be Boolean, integer, or least significant bit. Integer is probably the most useful. I'll come back and describe the other types in a moment. But here's where we configure the messages. So I'm going to go in here and configure the messages. Now the messages that I'm going to use, I could type these in, but I've actually got them saved in a text file off screen that I'd configured earlier. So I'm going to copy them from the text file and then come back in here and hit paste, and now you can see that it's put all of those in there. So that's a feature that you can use. I could have typed these all in here, and notice that it did in fact keep my color that I had saved in the text file as well. So here what we're going to do, and you can pause the video if you want to enter these in, but I have air compressor on, coolant pump on, hydraulic pump on, and then in automatic mode. Now that may be different states of the machine as it starts up or whatever process you have. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. Oh, by the way, notice that we have states 0 through 255. So that's a total of 256 messages that you can have in this object. Also notice here that you can have these navigation and scroll bars that you can scroll up and down, and we'll come back and talk about the list wrap. I also want to notice that the default color, this black text on blue, may not be very visible. What I'm going to do is change this to yellow just to make it visible as to which line is highlighted. We'll come back and talk about some of the other features just a minute as we get into this. I also need to go back here and make this an input enabled so that I can type a number in here and have it drive to that line. Now that might come from the PLC, that might come from elsewhere in your application, but for now, just to simulate that value, I've got this text object here. So let's close the screen and save it. Go ahead and run our project with our menus. We can go back to the active objects too. Now notice that it defaults to being on line 0. It defaults to whatever that tag is. And I can click on this line, and when I click on this line, notice that this right tag receives the value of the line that I'm on, line 0, line 1, line 2, and line 3 as I click on those. I can also scroll up and down using the scroll by moving one field at a time, moving to the top or the bottom of the list, or page all the way up to the top or all the way to the end. And we can change those buttons as well. Also, instead of having a user input, such as clicking on this or touching on a touch screen, we can also have the PLC or some other tag control this. So right now I'm on line 2. If I wanted to go to line 1, I can put a 1 in here, hit enter, and it will go right to that line. Let's say maybe line 3, hit enter, and it'll go right to that line. So I'm going to go and do a little bit more configuration on this object. Let's go back into the active objects too. Let's widen this out a little bit. Let's say there was some status associated with the automatic mode. How might we show that status in this? So if I'm here and I wanted to show status, maybe I would put inside, I'm going to put an extra space there, and then inside of curly brackets, maybe I'd put a tag called status, close curly bracket, and now it will show the value of that status tag during runtime. So I don't have that created yet, so maybe I would create that, leave that as an integer, and then what I might do is bring this down here, copy that, change this to status, let that be input enabled, and change this to the status tag. So now, sorry, I need to change this to the caption of status. So now I can simulate some kind of status showing up there and get that into that object. So let's say that I didn't have enough lines, maybe that it was relevant for some of these. I can maybe remove, let's say, all the way to the start and all the way to the end, but the other buttons are relevant. Let's see, what else? Okay, so now that I have that, there's a little bit more advanced feature. These are default to user enabled is 1 or true, and the control enable is true. I'm going to put some tags in here and gain some flexibility on this. So I'm going to call this user, and that doesn't exist. And because this is only going to be true or false, I'm going to have this as a Boolean. And the same thing with control. And I will also make this a Boolean. Say OK. And now I need some way to change those values. Oh, you know what I didn't do here is leave myself a pound sign so that I can actually enter something here. Okay. So now let's go back and take a look at the user and the control in the help system here. So the user and the control, the user enable, it allows the user to select a message via a touchscreen or a mouse. And the control enable allows the read search tag to make the change. So it's either user by touchscreen or mouse or whatever input, or the read search tag defines that. So let's put just a couple of quick buttons over here. I'll use the Graphics tab, go into Push Button, put an object here, say that it's a maintained, which would be a toggle. I'll go into this tag, and this will be the user, and go into the configuration for this, change this to user. And when it's on, it will be red. And I'll copy that over here, and we'll change this to the control tag. Just double click on that, control, say OK, and go back in here and change the text. Both of those. Say OK, and now when we save and run this, you should be able to see that by default those are not on. So I can no longer click on the object or select it with the arrows. I'm clicking on the arrows. And if I wanted to change the value here, let's say to be line 1, I hit enter, and that tag gets the value of line 1, but the ListBox does not respond. If I then turn on user enable, then I can click on the object and drive it. I can turn that off at will, and I can scroll up and down. Also notice that when you scroll up and down, the way that I left the configuration is it will list wrap. It will wrap back to the beginning. So if I go down one more time, it will go back to the top. If I keep going back to the top. If I go up one more from the top, it'll wrap around to the bottom side. Now that's user enabled. If I turn off the user enabled, I can no longer click on that. If I turn on the control enabled, then whatever's in this tag can drive it. So I can change that value there. Let's change it back to 0, and you can see that that drives it. If I turn this off, that no longer works. If I wanted some status in here, let's say this was value of 5, you can see that that value shows up. Now this could be coming from the PLC or anywhere else. Any tag value could drive into that display that we had in curly brackets. So let's go back into the development environment, take a look at the object again. Some other features that are nice to know about is the require enter for selection. If you have that on, then you have to hit enter after you've selected the line before it will get written into that object. Another thing to note is that if we use this as Boolean, it will only be 2 states, and if we use it as least significant bit, that would be a maximum of 32 bits, 0 through 31, and then it would take the least significant bit if this was a Boolean or a bit type value here. And so you can drive that in a different way. If you do configure this for least significant bit, you're going to see that the messages are limited to the 32 bits. So if we scroll down here, you can see 31 lines. If I cancel on that, if I drive this to Boolean, then the messages just have two lines there. So I think that's about it for the configuration. We can change the fonts and things of that nature, the border and the background of that as well. Let's move on to the next object. Before I do that, let's change this back to integer. Let's now move on to the smart message. Now the smart message is a single line message display that gets its values very similar to the ListBox from a message configuration here. But this object is really 3 different types of message or indicators here. We have the message display that is the simplest of them. The multi-state indicator, if we take a look at the help system for this, we scroll this down into view here. The message display displays any one of multiple messages within that single object. The multi-state indicator is pretty much the same object, but it also has the ability to display bitmap images within the messages. And thirdly, the multi-state push button is pretty much the same thing as the multi-state indicator with the messages and the ability to show a bitmap, but you can also increment and click on through messages and have it write to tag, which resembles a switch. Now the interesting thing is you can have multiple of these lines, but it effectively acts as a switch that can be used for hundreds of values in a single screen location. So when screen real estate is at a premium, that helps out a lot. So let's go through all these different combinations here. So what I might do for the messages, in fact, let's start here. The read search tag is similar to the list box. I'm going to call this MSG read, and that will be an integer. And let's then go in and configure the messages. And I have a few different messages that I can configure. And what I'm going to do is the unique one here is the error state. Now, that will show up if the value in the read search tag does not match any of the lines that are configured in this message. So I'm going to say maybe something like undefined and call maintenance. So they know something wrong happened. You should never get to that line, and if it shows up, then to call somebody to come fix it. Now, the other thing that I wanted to point out is we can also take these messages and bring them in from Excel if we wanted to. But I'm just going to type a few different ones in here and see what we can't do here. So maybe we'll do the same thing that we did with the other one. The air compressor is on. We'll just say air is on. The coolant is on. The hydraulic pumps on. And then maybe this one is in automatic mode. Now, we can also change the, scroll over here a little bit, the text foreground, the text background, whether or not it's blinking, the rectangle around it, foreground, background, and whether or not the rectangle itself is blinking for each individual line. So here I've got three different states or values. This value column is what's used in the object itself. And if we click on OK, and I'm going to need a way to write into this tag. So this was similar to what I wanted, so I'm just going to copy this down and change that to the message read tag. And that should be able to drive that or simulate that object. So let's go ahead and run that now. Save that, click on Run. Back to the active objects 2, and if I change this to, let's say, line 2, line 3, go back to line 0, and if I happen to go out of range, let's say I went up to message number 9, you can see that undefined called maintenance. So that's the way that particular object works. And the nice thing is you can optimize this, again, for screen space. I might make this only as high and the space that I needed to be, or as long as my longest message was. I'm going to copy this object and keep all that configuration. And I know that I'm going to need to have this just a little bit bigger for this one because I'm going to bring in a bitmap picture here. So for this particular object, the difference is when I change this to multi-state indicator, under the message line, in addition to changing all the text foreground and background and the rectangle around it, I can also include a graphic file. So what I'm going to do is grab a graphic file. Now I think in a previous video I've used the maintenance.bmp that I created. As a convenience, what I've done is I've gone ahead and put that on the Indusoft website, and I've put that at indusoft.com/maintenance.bmp. And what you can do is right-click on that in your browser and save image as, and put that into your project. In this case, I'm in the IWS 7.1 folder that I created in one of the first videos, and then the IWS training project folder, and I'm just going to save that right here at the project root level. Save that and go ahead and close this. And so now I should have that in my project root, and here under messages I can scroll over and I can just type in maint.bmp, click on OK, and now when that particular error code comes up and it says call maintenance, I'm going to have the maintenance icon come up in there. Click on OK and run this. So you can see that it comes up with that icon in there, and if I get off of that line, then that icon goes away. So we can put different icons in for or different images. They don't even have to be icon size. They can be very large if you needed them to be, right there inside of that message. The next object is in the same type. Sorry, it's in the same object, but it's a different type. It is the MultiState push button. And when I configure this, you'll notice that the write tag field becomes enabled. When I click on that, now I can have a write tag in here. I'm going to call that MSG write. And you might name this something to be more descriptive for what your application is. But to keep this straight, I want to show you using these tag names. Click on OK. Now the type of this tag name can be any of these types. And depending on what type of message you've put into the object, value column will automatically go into that particular type. Now it will be converted to something that makes sense. If you put a string into an integer tag, it'll show up as 0. If you put some text in and put it as a string, it will show up. But I'm going to go ahead and choose this as integer for now, and click on messages. And here's what I was talking about. I can put different text in here. Now you can't enter text, but you can copy and paste text into this field. So for example, if I wanted the word mode into this field, I can actually copy this and paste it into that field. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to leave the number 2 in there. Also, I wanted to point out that this particular object has 15 fields associated with it when we're in the push button state. And if we need more, we can configure this. Instead of being a static data source, we can configure it to go to a text file and pick a text file from there. Just another note to point out, if I go back on the multi-state indicator that's not the push button type and go into the messages, I can scroll down here and have up to line number 499, or a total of 500 messages plus an error condition. And if you need more than those, you can also go to a text file as well. And to get the formatting of the text file, I can copy this and hit Control-C, let's say, and I will open up Excel and hit paste, and this will come in with all the different things that we need in here. And we could copy this down, continue this, maybe use Excel's features to auto increment numbers, let's say 3, 4. Let's see, I need to start a series going here. Pick that 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then configure hundreds, if not thousands, whatever a text file could be. You can either save that as a CSV file or a text file using the proper format that's described in the help. And you could then copy and paste that back in here, and that's a way to do that, or save that as a CSV and then use it as the text file source. So back on the multi-state push button, we've configured a write tag in there. So now we're configuring, or we're pointing to the message with the message read tag. Now we need to display a tag that will show the message write tag. I'm just going to copy this by hitting Control-C. And I had a similar thing up here for the list box. I'm going to copy this down underneath here and paste that tag that I got before. Go back to the text and tell it that this caption is the message write. Alright, so let's try this again. Save and run. And now when I go onto this menu, I can click on this object. It will auto increment to the next state and write that value of that next state out to the message write tag. So every time I click on that, and it will wrap it back around as well. So you might want to use this to auto increment or help an operator step through steps on a particular process or a machine. And so those are some of the different ways that we can do that. And if I drive this to a value that's not good, you can, out of range, then I get the undefined message, and go back here, take a look at this, and there's no undefined state on the multi-state push button. Okay, so once I have that, I can also change some of my border weights. I can use keys, the letter keys. I can just type on my keyboard the letter A, and that would drive that. Or I can choose from function keys or other keys in the keyboard and then modify that with Control, Shift, and Alt. So that's pretty much how the multi-state push button, multi-state indicators, and the message display work. And we also have configurations for Boolean integers and least significant bits as well on that. So that's how those work. And let's scroll down here, put another object on the screen. Now there's a brand new object here in Indiesoft Web Studio. I'm going to go back to the Graphics tab. Okay, so now I'm going to go create a TextBox object here from the Active Objects group. I'll put this here on the screen. I'll go in, and the way that this object works is it's kind of a cross between the caption field of a rectangle, which we put up in the header earlier in the video series, and the text object. So let's put a new tag in here. We'll call this TextBox, if I could spell TextBox object, or TextBox tag. And we'll create this first as an integer. Say OK. And because input enable is in here, I'm going to be able to input into this. So I'm going to copy this tag and paste this down into my database SPY. Currently I can see the value is 0. Let's go ahead and put 123 in there. Now when I save this screen and run it, you can see that it has the value of 123. So if I can then use this as an entry, 456, hit enter. If I go back into my development environment, I can see that 456 is in there. Let's go back into the Graphics tab, back on that screen, and scroll down here. So for that type of object, what I might do is just make this text box a little bit smaller for that particular integer tag. But what I'm going to do now is enlarge this here a little bit, and I'm going to go change this text box tag to be a string type tag. And so if we go back in here, now this will give you an idea of how to change tag types once you've created them. Go to the Global tab, go up to the Datasheet view, and because these are in the order that you created them, it will be the last one since it was the last one I created, and change this from integer to string. Save or close that properties of the of the tags. And now when I run this, let's put in here this is text, and make sure I have enough room widthwise for that. Save my screen and go ahead and click on run. Now we can see that it says this is text, and because that has data entry on it, I should be able to change this text to something else. Changed. Hit enter, go back into my development environment, and see that it has the value of changed. Now we could do something a little bit more special with this. Let's go in to the datasheet view again and change this tag to be an array. So here I can change this tag to be an array. We'll put a value of 3 in here, which will be 4 indexes. And now that this is a string tag with an array, I'll go back into the text object, the text box object. Scroll down here again, and now tell it it's multiple line. And with that, now we'll get multiple lines out of this. And because this is an array, I can go down here into Database SPY, and using square brackets, now put the different index of the array. So I can copy this, Control C, Control V, and I'll do that for all the different elements, but now I have to change the index of these from 1 and 2 and 3. Now I can put different values in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 9, 6, and 3. Well, let's put some text in here. Text, and we can put some numbers in there as text. Line 2, and more. Just put some random stuff in there. And now that that's set up, I think I can save this, run this. Now we should see all those lines of text, and I can change the first one to be line 0, and we'll change this 456 into next, and enter. Now I can go back into my development environment to look at the database spy. We can see that those lines were changed. Now, depending on your screen layout and how much space you have, maybe if you have a smaller screen and screen real estate is at a premium, you can make this object smaller and tell it to turn on the scroll bars, and maybe even if you have long sentences, that you can tell it to word wrap as well. So let's turn on those scroll bars, make that object a little bit smaller. We'll click on Run, and now you can see that we can scroll up and down through the text. So that gives you some various ways to enter multiple lines of text in some small space on the screen. Because I ran without my menus, I'm going to hit Alt F4 and get back into development environment and show you another option that you have with this text box object is we can limit or mask the number of characters that we'll show. So let's say out of all these different lines, we only want to see the first 4 characters. So I can tell it to limit that to 4. This will not take a tag. Currently, this only will let you put in a constant number in there. So I have that in there. And now I can save this, close my screens, click on Run, and now you will see that it's limited that to only those first 4 characters on each individual line. So there's some different reasons where you might want to do that, some different formatting and whatnot. Let's go back into the object yet again. Scroll down here, and we can, I mentioned, turn on word wrap, and a new feature that we have, depending on the font that you've chosen, is right to left data entry for languages that support right to left entry as well. And let's see, what else do we have in here? That looks like it for the different ways that you can use the text box object. Let's see, so in this video, just to summarize, we covered the text box object, we covered the 3 different types of the smart messages, the message display, the multi-state indicator, and the multi-state push button, and as well the ListBox object. Hopefully you got something out of this, and for more information you can always contact us at www.indusoft.com on our webpage to get some more information, or send us an email at info@indusoft.com. Thanks, and have a great day.